Hey guys, tonight we plunge into the gritty, flickering heart of medieval Europe, where the Black Death's claw tears through towns, leaving a trail of fear and a surge of looting in its wake. Imagine you're creeping down a rain-soaked alley in 1348 somewhere in England's muddy underbelly. Think York or London, but it could be any plague-stricken burg. The airs sour with damp wool-rotting cabbage, and that unmistakable whiff of death like a punch you can't dodge. A lone raven croaks from a sagging rooftop, eyeing you like you're next on the menu. Spoiler, you probably won't survive this. But as you sidestep a cart creaking under a heap of shrouded corpses, you catch a shadow flitting through a smashed shop window, arms stuffed with loaves and a glinting candlestick. Why does the plague turn honest folks into thieves? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and local time. I'm dying to know where you're drifting off from. Now dim, the lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're picking your way through this doomed town, boots squelching on cobblestones, slick with muck you don't want to identify. Every third door sports a crude red cross slapped on with paint. That still, wet quarantine's grim graffiti. The Black Death, which historians say wiped out 30 to 60% of Europe between 1347 and 1351, isn't just stealing lives. It's shredding the rules that hold society together. A woman in a frayed shawl huddles against a wall, clutching a wooden cross her lips, moving in frantic prayer. Her eyes, though, aren't on heaven. They're scanning the street, wary of you. Fear's the real plague here, and it's contagious. Why does this spark crime? Because fear flips a switch in your head. You pass a butcher's shop, its shutters bashed in the faint smell of blood and sawdust lingering. Someone's raided it, and not for a neighborly borrow. Looting and robbery explode during plagues because survival kicks morality to the curb. Your stomach's gnawing, your sister's coughing, and the dead guy down the lane left a sack of barley behind. Who's stopping you? Nobody, that's who. Historians still argue whether this was cold opportunism or a gut-driven fight to see another dawn. But the evidence is stark. Plagues turn towns into lawless playgrounds. Let's pause at that butcher's shop. You poke your head inside, and it's chaos meat hooks swaying a barrel of salt tipped over, spilling like snow. Here's a quirky tidbit. Looters didn't always grab the practical stuff. Some snagged oddities, like silver goblets or embroidered cloaks, as if looking rich might fool the plague. You can almost hear them muttering, "If I'm dying, I'm dying fabulous." Makes you chuckle, right? Like swapping your last coin for a peacock feather hat while the world burns. Back outside, the streets unnervingly quiet. Half the town's dead, the other half's bolted doors or breaking them. The plague's ruthless killing in days, sometimes hours, so you're running on raw instinct. You skirt a puddle that's definitely not rainwater and aim for the market square. It's a ghost town, stalls abandoned, a lone apple rolling in the dirt. A figure in a hooded cloak brushes past a suspicious lump under their arm. Stolen bet on it. You don't shout thief, you're not that reckless. The town watch is either sick dead or pocketing bribes. Medieval law enforcement's about as useful as a fork in a soup fight, and you can't help but smirk at the thought. Here's a solid fact to anchor us. The Black Death gutted labor market so badly that survivors demanded higher wages, which infuriated nobles and lit the fuse for unrest. Unrest plus empty houses. That's a looter's jackpot. You're feeling the weight of this place, now each step heavier than the last. The air's thick, not just with disease, but with choices. Do you bang on that unmarred door, hoping for a friendly face, or keep moving? Every choice is a roll of the dice. And here's a little jab to keep it light. If you think your phone dying mid-scroll is a crisis, try trading your only goat for a plague cure that's just boiled nettles. You'd probably swipe a loaf or two yourself just to feel like you're winning. As you weave through the narrowing streets, the church's silhouette looms ahead, its spire stabbing the gray sky. Is it a sanctuary or a trap? You're about to find out. This town's a pressure cooker, and the plague's cranking the heat. You notice the little things, a child's shoe abandoned in the mud, a shutter creaking on one hinge, the distant wail of someone who's lost too much. It's not just bodies piling up. It's trust order, the glue of community. You pass a tavern, its door ajar, tankards scattered like fallen soldiers. Someone's been here helping themselves to ale, or whatever else wasn't nailed down. Another joke to cut the gloom. Imagine looting a tavern and picking the one barrel of vinegar instead of medieval luck at its finest. But seriously, the collapse of normal life is why robbery thrives. No one's watching, no one's counting, and survival's the only law left. You're not just walking through a town, you're walking through a moment when humanity stripped bare. The plague's a thief, too, stealing certainty, leaving only questions. Will you make it to tomorrow? Will anyone? You glance back at the butcher's. Shop its wrecked doorway, a silent shout of what's coming. The market square is closer now, but so's the sense that something's watching, maybe a looter, maybe just your own paranoia. Either way, you're in deep, and the story's just beginning. You're standing in the market square, now the heart of this plague-ravaged town. But it's nothing like the bustling hub you'd imagined. The stalls are skeletal, their canvas flaps tattered, swaying in a chilly breeze that carries the faint tang of smoke and decay. A single onion rolls across the cobblestones, abandoned like it knows no one's coming back. You squint through the gray dawn, and the emptiness hits you hard. Streets that once thrummed with hawkers and gossip are now silent, save for the occasional creak of a shutter or a distant cough that makes your skin crawl. The Black Deaths turned this place into a ghost town, and you're starting to feel like a trespasser in someone else's nightmare. Isolation's the new normal. And it's not just keeping people apart, it's breeding mistrust and cracking open the door to lawlessness. You take a cautious step forward, your boots crunching on a shard of broken pottery. Every sound feels too loud, like it's announcing your presence to unseen eyes. You can't shake the feeling you're being watched. Maybe it's that guy lurking by the well, his hood pulled low, or maybe it's just the weight of a town where no one trusts anyone anymore. The plagues forced everyone behind locked doors, and those red-crossed houses you passed earlier, they're not just quarantines, they're cages. Families huddle inside praying the disease skips them, but they're also eyeing their neighbors through cracked shutters, wondering who's hoarding food. Or worse, who's already sick. You get it when death's knocking paranoia's your new best friend. This isolation's a slow poison. You wander past a row of shuttered shops, a tailor's, a cobbler's, a baker's with a faint whiff of moldy dough. The silence is oppressive, broken only by a sudden clatter down an alley. You freeze, heart thumping. Was that a cat? Or someone rifling through a dead man's belongings? Looting spiking, because people are cut off, not just from each other, but from the systems that kept things civil. A mainstream fact to ground us, medieval towns relied on tight-knit communities and local lords to enforce order. But the Black Death killed so many, sometimes half a town in weeks, that those bonds shattered. No one's organizing night watches or market patrols anymore. The rules are gone, and you're seeing the fallout. You decide to move toward that alley, curiosity outweighing caution. The walls close in damp and moss slick, and you spot a overturned crate, its contents rotten apples, and a few bent nails spilled across the ground. Someone's been here scavenging. You can almost picture them, a desperate soul who used to mend shoes or sell herbs, now smashing crates for anything edible. Here's a quirky tidbit: some looters left bizarre calling cards, like piling stolen goods in neat stacks, before fleeing as if apologizing to the ghosts of their victims. Weird, right? Like they wanted to say, "I'm not a bad guy, just starving." But back to the alley. You notice a scrap of cloth caught on a nail fluttering like a tiny flag. It's not just evidence of theft, it's a sign of how fast trust has eroded. Why does isolation breed lawlessness? Because when you're alone, you stop believing in us. You're not part of a community anymore. You're a lone wolf and SOs everyone else. You pass a boarded up house, and through a gap, you catch a glimpse of eyes wide, scared, suspicious. They're not waving you in for a chat. Historians still argue whether this mistrust was more about survival or a deeper unraveling of medieval values, but the effect's the same: people turn on each other. You're starting to feel it too, that itch to check over your shoulder, to clutch your imaginary sack of grain a little tighter. What if someone's trailing you, waiting for a dark corner to pounce? You emerge from the alley into a wider street, and the scene's no better. A cart's abandoned mid-road. Its wheel cracked, sacks of wool slashed open and spilling like guts. You can't help but smirk. Medieval looters weren't exactly masterminds. Imagine breaking into a merchant's house for a haul and lugging home a cart of damp wool. Congrats, you're rich and mildew. But the joke fades fast. This street's a graveyard of normal life, and the isolation's making people desperate. You spot a man darting across the road, a bundle under his arm. He doesn't look at you, just vanishes into a doorway. Thief, survivor. Both you don't follow? The plague's taught you to keep your distance, and that's the problem. Distance creates gaps, and lawlessness fills them. You're starting to understand the rhythm of this place. Every locked door, every empty street is a step toward chaos. The church you saw earlier, its spire poking the sky, feels like a distant memory now. You're tempted to head back, but the streets are a maze, and the air's growing heavier, like it's pressing you down. Another joke to lighten the load: if you think your neighbor borrowing your lawnmowers annoying, try catching them stealing your last turnip because the plague made me do it. You'd probably board up your windows too. But seriously, the plague's isolation isn't just physical. It's mental, emotional, spiritual. You're alone, and so's everyone else, and that's when the knives come out. You pause by a well, its bucket dangling half lowered. You lean over, peering into the dark water, and for a second, you see your reflection, tired, wary, a stranger in this broken world. The plague's not just killing bodies, it's killing trust. You think back to that butcher shop from earlier, its wrecked doorway, a warning. That was just the start. Here in these empty streets, mistrust is a spark, and lawlessness is the fire. You hear another sound, a low murmur, maybe voices, maybe trouble. It's coming from the direction of the church. Do you head that way, or stick to the shadows? Your choice, but the panic's spreading, and you're right in the middle of it. You're still in this plague-stricken town, the church spire now, a faint shadow behind you, as you weave through streets, that feel more like a trap with every step. Your stomach growls a sharp, twisting pang that's not just imagination, it's real raw and relentless. Hunger's a new character in this story, and it's not playing nice. The Black Death's not just snatching lives, it's strangling the food supply, turning every crust of bread into a treasure worth fighting for. You pass a boarded up bakery, its sign swinging crookedly, and the faint memory of fresh loaves makes your mouth water. But there's no bread here, not anymore. Starvation's pushing people to the edge, and you're starting to feel why looting's not just a crime, it's a lifeline. You pause by a crumbling wall, catching your breath, and notice your hands trembling. When did you last eat? Yesterday, the day before. You can't remember. And that's the problem. The plagues disrupted everything. Crops rot in fields. Because farmers are dead, markets are empty. Because traders won't risk the disease. And those who have food guard it like gold. You spot a scrawny boy, maybe 10, rooting through a pile of refuse. He pulls out a moldy turnip, takes a bite, and scurries off. You wince, but you get it. Hunger doesn't care about manners. It's a beast, and it's driving people to steal, to break into homes, to snatch anything that might fill the void. Let's linger on that thought. You're hungry, and so's everyone else. You pass a house with a red cross on the door, but through a cracked shutter you see movement a woman pale and gaunt, slicing a single onion into paper-thin slivers for her kids. That onion's probably all they've got. A mainstream fact to anchor us, the Black Death caused widespread food shortages because it killed off laborers and disrupted trade networks, leading to skyrocketing prices, sometimes 10 times normal, for a sack of grain. You're not just fighting the plague, you're fighting for a bite, and that fight's turning neighbors into enemies. You keep moving your steps sluggish, each one a reminder of the energy you don't have. The street opens into a small square where a fountain sits dry, its stone basin cracked. A man's slumped against it, his clothes ragged, his eyes hollow. He's not begging. He's too far gone for that. You want to help, but what do you have? Nothing? And that's when you see a flicker of movement across the square. Two figures cloaked in quick slip into a narrow house with no cross on the door. You hear a crash, then muffled voices. They're looting, and you know why. Hunger's a louder voice than conscience. You don't call out. You're too tired, and honestly, you're not sure you wouldn't do the same. Here's a quirky tidbit. To lighten the gloom, some medieval looters got creative, stealing not just food, but things like beehives, hoping to scrape a bit of honey. Imagine risking a swarm of angry bees for a spoonful of sweetness talk about dedication. You almost chuckle, picturing a thief running from a buzzing cloud, honey dripping down their chin. But the humor fades fast. You're back in the square, and the reality's grim. Those looters aren't villains. They're you, or they could be. Historians still argue whether hunger-driven theft was a breakdown of morals or a natural response to crisis. But when your stomach's screaming, philosophy doesn't fill it. You decide to skirt the square, keeping to the shadows. The air's colder now, or maybe it's just you, weakening under hunger's grip. You pass a tavern, its door half open, the smell of stale ale and mildew wafting out. You peek inside, and it's a rectable's overturned a barrel, split open, its contents long gone. Someone's been here, probably hoping for a forgotten sack of barley or a jug of wine. You can't blame them. Hunger's a thief too, stealing your strength, your clarity, your humanity. You think back to that butcher shop from before it slashed sacks and broken shutters. That was hunger at work, and it's only getting worse. You're starting to feel the weight of this town in a new way. It's not just the empty streets or the mistrust you sensed earlier. It's the physical ache in your gut, the way your vision blurs at the edges. You spot a discarded apple core in the dirt, half-eaten, crawling with ants. For a split second, you consider picking it up. Yeah, it's that bad. And here's a little jab to keep things light. If you think missing your morning coffee's rough, try bartering your only shoe for a handful of shriveled peas. You'd be smashing windows too, just to feel something other than empty. But seriously, hunger's rewriting the rules. Stealing's not about greed, it's about survival. You push on, drawn toward a cluster of houses at the edge of town. The streets are narrower here, the buildings leaning in like they're whispering secrets. You hear a dog barking sharp and frantic, then silence. Up ahead, a door's ajar, and you catch the faint glow of a candle inside. You creep closer, heart pounding, and peer through the gap. A family's gathered around a table, sharing a single loaf of bread, tearing off tiny pieces. They're quiet, their faces drawn, but they're together. You feel a pang, not just hunger, but envy. They've got something to share, even if it's crumbs. You back away, not wanting to be seen. You're not a thief, not yet, but the line's getting blurry. The hunger's changing you, just like it's changing this town. You think about that boy with the turnip, the looters in the square, the woman with her onion. They're not monsters. They're starving. You pass a garden, its plants wilted, stripped of anything edible. Someone's been here too, probably at night, ripping up roots in the dark. Another joke to cut the tension. Imagine looting a garden and coming away with a fistful of dandelions medieval salad. Anyone but the truth's heavier. Hunger's a force, and it's pushing people to break every rule they once lived by. You're nearing the edge of town now, where the houses thin out and the fields begin, though they're more mud than crop. The hunger's still there, a constant gnaw, and you're starting to understand why looting's everywhere. It's not just about food. It's about hope, about grabbing something, anything to keep going. You glance back at the town, its rooftops jagged against the sky. The church spire is still visible, a reminder of the world you're leaving behind. But hunger's leading you forward, and you're not sure where it'll take you next. You're trudging past the edge of town now, where the muddy fields stretch out barren and neglected. The hunger from before still gnawing at your insides like a persistent rat. The air's damp, heavy with the scent of wet earth and something sour, maybe rotting crops left unharvested. You're heading toward a trade road, one of those rutted paths that used to hum with merchants' carts, their wheels creaking under sacks of grain wool or wine. But as you crest a low hill, you see the roads deserted, save for a splintered cart tipped into a ditch, its cargo barrels and cloth scattered like bones. The Black Death's not just killing people, it's choking the life out of markets, and you're about to witness how this collapse is turning the world into a looter's playground. You pick your way down to the road, your boots sinking into the mud. The cart's a wreck, its axle snapped, and you can tell it's been picked over. A torn sack spills barley into the dirt, already sprouting tiny green shoots, useless now. You kneel, sifting through the wreckage, and find a single unbroken jug, its wax seal cracked but intact. You shake it. Something sloshes inside. Wine oil. Doesn't matter. You tuck it under your arm. You're not a thief, you tell yourself, just practical. But that's the thing. The lines blurring and the crumbling markets are why. Without trade, there's no food. No goods, no order, just chaos, and chaos loves a looter. Let's unpack this. You stand wiping mud from your hands and scan the empty road. Normally, this path would be alive with travelers' merchants, haggling pilgrims, praying peddlers, shouting about miracle cures. Now it's a graveyard. A mainstream fact to ground us, the Black Death devastated trade networks across Europe as ports closed, merchants died, and fear of infection halted caravans. By 1348, major hubs like Venice and Bruges saw shipments drop by half or more, starving towns of supplies. You're feeling it now, that void where abundance used to be. No grain from the countryside, no fish from the coast, no spices from the east. And when there's nothing to buy, you take. You start walking along the road, the jug heavy under your arm, and notice signs of others who've passed through. A trampled cloak, a broken crate, a scattering of coins too bent to be worth picking up. Looters have been here, and they're not subtle. You spot a crude arrow carved into a tree pointing toward a side path, a signal. Maybe bandits marking a stash. You hesitate, remembering those cloaked figures from the town square. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some looters use secret signs like notched sticks or piled stones to guide their pals to hidden loot. It's almost cute, like medieval graffiti, until you realize they'd knife you for that jug you're carrying. You keep moving, sticking to the main road. Why does a market collapse mean more looting? Because trade was the glue of medieval life. You think back to that empty market square, its stalls abandoned, and now you're seeing the bigger picture. Without merchants, there's no food flowing, no coins changing hands, no reason to play nice. You pass a milestone, its carvings weathered, marking the way to a city you'll never reach. The road feels endless, and the silence is unnerving. Historians still argue whether the trade collapse was more deadly than the plague itself. But out here it's clear: no trade, no stability. People aren't just hungry. They're desperate, and desperation makes you grab what you can. You're starting to feel exposed, the open road offering no cover. Up ahead, you spot a cluster of figures. 3, maybe 4, huddled around another wrecked cart. You duck behind a gnarled tree, heart pounding. They're rifling through the wreckage, tossing aside broken pottery and stuffing cloth into sacks. One laughs, a harsh sound that carries. Looters, no question. You clutch your jug tighter, wondering if they'd fight for it. Probably. You're not hero enough to find out, so you wait watching. They move on, disappearing into the dusk, leaving the cart emptier than before. You creep out, checking their leavings. Nothing but shards and a single leather glove, its fingers stiff with mud. This road's a microcosm of the chaos. You keep walking the jug, bumping against your side, and pass more signs of trouble: a burned-out wagon, its wheels charred. A scattering of sheep bones picked clean by scavengers, human or otherwise. The plagues shut down the ports, the fairs, the river barges, and now every abandoned cart's a jackpot for someone with no scruples. You can't help but smirk. Medieval looters must have felt like kids in a candy store, except the candy's moldy and the store's on fire. A little joke to ease the tension. Imagine looting a merchant's cart and finding only a crate of turnips. Congrats, you're the king of bland. But the reality's darker. These wrecks are proof that no one's coming to restock. You're getting tired, the hunger from before mixing with the weight of the jug and the endless road. You pass a small shrine, its wooden saint, chipped and leaning, a few wilted flowers at its base. Someone's still praying, but it's not helping the markets. You think about that family you saw, sharing their tiny loaf, and wonder how long they'll last without trade? The answer's grim. You spot another sign of looting. Sack of wool slashed open, its contents blowing across the road like dirty snow. Someone took what they could carry and left the rest. That's the new economy take, now worry later. The road curves, and you see the faint outline of a village in the distance, its rooftops barely visible through the mist. You're tempted to head there, but the roads taught you something: trust no one. Those looters by the cart weren't amateurs. They moved like they'd done this before. Another joke to keep it light: if you think your delivery guy's slow, try waiting for a medieval merchant who's dead in a ditch. You'd be looting too, just to feel in control. But seriously, the collapsed markets are a domino effect. No trade, no food, no order. Every wrecked cart's a chance for someone to turn thief. You're almost at the village now, the road narrowing, the mud thicker. You pass one last rekka, merchant stall, its awning, torn, its goods long gone. You poke around, finding only a broken quill and a scrap of parchment, the ink smudged but legible. To London 3 barrels. The rest is gone like the world it described. You tuck the parchment in your pocket, a useless keepsake, and glance back at the road. The trade routes are dead, and the chaos is alive. You think of that butcher's shop, its broken shutters, and the empty square, its silent stalls. It's all connected: hunger, mistrust, and now this broken lifeline. The village looms closer, but so does the sense that looting's just the start of what's coming. You've left the desolate trade road behind, the village's faint outline now sharper as you approach its edge, the jug of unknown liquid still tucked under your arm. The air's thicker here, heavy with the stench of smoke and something fouler: decay, unmistakable, seeping from the ground itself. You're nearing a makeshift graveyard, a grim patch of earth where the plague's victims are piled more than buried. Shovels lean against a crooked fence, and a rickety cart sits nearby, half loaded with shrouded shapes. You shudder, but what catches your eye isn't the dead, it's the living. A group of men, rough-looking, their clothes stained with dirt, and worse, are muttering near the cart. These are the grave diggers, the plague's grim workforce, and you're about to uncover how they're turning chaos into profit, trading shovels for banditry. You creep closer, keeping low behind a gnarled tree, its roots clawing the muddy ground. The grave diggers don't notice you. They're too busy arguing, their voices low but sharp. One holds a sack, lumpy with odd-shaped candlesticks, maybe, or coins. Another clutches a dagger, its blade glinting in the dim light. These aren't just men burying bodies. They're scavengers exploiting the plague's disorder. You feel a chill, not from the cold, but from the realization the people tasked with cleaning up death are cashing in on it. Your stomach twists, still empty from that hunger you felt earlier, but now it's mixed with disgust. Let's dig into this. You watch the grave diggers, their faces hard, their hands calloused from more than just shovels. In medieval towns, grave diggers were often outcast, criminals, drifters, or the desperate hired because no one else would touch the plague's victims. A mainstream fact to ground us during the Black Death. Grave diggers were paid well, sometimes earning more than skilled craftsmen because their work was so dangerous and despised. But here's the catch: they had access to the dead, their homes, their belongings. You see it now in the sack that clinks as the gravedigger shifts his weight. They're not just burying bodies, they're looting them, turning the graveyard into a gold mine. You shift your position, the jug bumping against your side, and catch a snippet of their talk. "The widow's house next street," one says, his voice gravelly. "No cross yet, but she's coughing." Your blood runs cold. They're not waiting for death. They're planning ahead, targeting the sick before they're even gone. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some grave diggers were so bold they'd sell plague relics bones or trinkets supposedly from holy victims, claiming they'd ward off the disease. Imagine buying a saint's finger for a fortune only to find it's from some poor sod who died last week. You'd laugh if it weren't so grim. But these men aren't joking. They're predators, and the plague's their cover. Why do grave diggers turn bandit? Because chaos is their playground. You glance at the graveyard, its fresh mounds, uneven, some barely covered. The plague's overwhelming bodies stacking faster than anyone can dig. No one's watching these men, not closely. The town's too busy dying. Historians still argue whether grave diggers were opportunistic crooks or just survivors doing what they had to. But out here, it's clear. They're exploiting a system that's already broken. You think back to that wrecked butcher shop, its shutters smashed in the empty market square. The grave diggers are just another cog in the chaos, but they're closer to the source death itself. You're tempted to slip away, but something holds you. One of the men laughs a harsh bark as he pulls a silver chain from the sack. It glints delicate, probably a woman's. You imagine it torn from a neck, maybe still warm. Your grip tightens on the jug, a reminder of your own shaky morals. You're not like them, you tell yourself, but the line's thin. You notice a shovel lying in the dirt, its blade crusted with earth and something darker. These men dig by day and steal by night, using their grim job as a map to the vulnerable. You can't help but smirk talk about a career pivot. A little joke to cut the tension. If you think your job's rough, try moonlighting as a bandit while knee-deep in plague pits. You'd probably swipe a candlestick too. You're starting to feel the weight of this place, the graveyard's silence louder than any noise. The men move off, dragging their sack, heading toward the village. You wait, heart pounding, until they're out of sight. Then you step into the open, skirting the graves. The earth soft, sinking under your boots, and you try not to think about what's beneath. You spot a small pile of goods near the cart cloth, a dented goblet, a pair of shoes too small for a man, stolen, no doubt stashed for later. The grave diggers aren't just looting. They're organized, turning their grim trade into a business. You feel a surge of anger, but it's fleeting. Hunger, fear, mistrust, they're all part of this, and you're not immune. You decide to follow the men, keeping your distance. The village is close now, its houses huddled together, some with red crosses, others dark and silent. You pass a shed, its door ajar, and glimpse a stack of tools, shovels, picks, a scythe, gravedigger's gear, but also weapons. You imagine them breaking into a house, using those tools to pry open chests or scare off anyone who fights back. Another joke to keep it light. Imagine a gravedigger trying to fence a stolen scythe at the market, awkward sales pitch much, but the truth's heavier. These men are thriving because the plague stripped away oversight. No sheriff, no priest, no one to stop them. You're deep in the village now, the streets narrow and claustrophobic. You hear voices, ahead low and urgent. The gravediggers are outside a house, its door unmarked, but its windows dark. One knocks a fake concern in his voice, calling for someone inside. You duck into an alley watching. The door creaks open, and a woman's voice, weak, answers. You can't hear the words, but you know the game. They'll offer help, maybe promise a burial, then take everything she's got. You think of that family, sharing their loaf, the boy, with his turnip. The grave diggers don't care. They're the plague's shadow, profiting where it kills. You're torn stay hidden or do something, but what can you do? You're one person hungry, tired carrying a jug that's starting to feel like a curse. The men slip inside and the door shuts. You wait the silence pressing in, broken only by a dog's distant howl. The graveyards behind you, the trade roads, a memory, and this village is a new kind of hell. The grave diggers are proof that chaos breeds monsters, but they're not so different from you. You glance at the jug, its weight, a quiet accusation. The plague's turning everyone into something they're not, and you're not sure where you'll end up. You're still in this plague-ravaged village, the gravediggers' voices fading as you slip away from their grim hustle, the jug still heavy under your arm. The narrow streets are suffocating their walls, leaning in, stained with soot and despair. You pass a small chapel, its door ajar, a faint flicker of candlelight spilling out. The Black Death's not just tearing through bodies, it's clawing at the soul of this place, shaking the faith that once held it together. You feel it in the air, a restless unease, like the town's lost its compass. As you step closer to the chapel, you're about to explore how crumbling religious norms are sparking reckless crime, turning prayers into excuses and morals into dust. You nudge the chapel door open, wincing at the creak. Inside it's dim, the air thick with wax and damp stone. A few candles burn on a makeshift altar, their flames trembling. A lone figure kneels at a pew head, bowed, but their hands aren't clasped in prayer. They're clutching a small sack, its contents clinking softly. You freeze, half hidden in the shadows. This isn't worship, it's something else. The figure mutters not a prayer, but a plea, something about forgiveness and survival. You get it, faith's faltering, and when it does, the rules that kept people in line start to slip. That sack, probably stolen, and this chapel's no sanctuary, it's a hideout. Let's unpack this. You ease back, keeping quiet, and take in the scene. The chapel's walls are bare, stripped of the usual icons. Where's the silver cross, the gilded candlesticks, gone, likely pawned or melted down? A mainstream fact, to ground us during the Black Death churches across Europe, where hit hard priests died at higher rates than most, with some estimates suggesting 40% of clergy perished by 1350, leaving parishes leaderless. Without priests, sermons, or sacraments, faith became a shaky scaffold. You see it in this kneeler, their guilt mixing with defiance. They're not here for absolution. They're here because there's nowhere else to go. You slip outside the cold air, a slap after the chapel's stuffy warmth. The street's empty, but you hear a distant shout, then silence. Faith used to be the glue of medieval life confession mass. The fear of hell kept most in check. But the plague's rewriting the script. You pass a house with a red cross, its door splintered, probably raided. The looters didn't care about the "thou shalt not steal" bit, and why would they? God's not answering, or so it seems. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some desperate souls stole church relics, believing a saint's bone might shield them from the plague, only to pawn it when miracles didn't come. Imagine haggling over a supposed holy finger while coughing your lungs out. Medieval priorities, right? Why does a shaken faith spark crime? Because when you stop believing in divine justice, human rules feel flimsy. You wander toward the village square, smaller than the town's, but just as desolate. A wooden cross stands at its center, crudely carved, surrounded by wilted flowers and a few broken rosaries. Someone's tried to pray here, but it didn't stop the looting. You spot a smashed crate nearby, its contents cloth, and a few apples spilled across the dirt. You can almost picture the thief, maybe, that figure from the chapel, justifying it. God's abandoned us, so why not? Historians still argue whether the plague eroded faith permanently or just exposed its cracks. But out here, the effect's clear. Morals are slipping and crimes filling the gap. You're starting to feel the weight of this place, not just the hunger or the mistrust from before, but a deeper unease. You pass a tavern, its sign dangling, and peek inside. It's a mess stable's overturned a tankard rolling on the floor. Someone's been here stealing ale or whatever else wasn't bolted down. You can't help, but smirk medieval looters weren't exactly master planners. A little joke to lighten the mood. Imagine breaking into a tavern for a big score and finding only a barrel of sour mead. Cheers to bad luck. But the truth's heavier. Without faiths, guardrails, people aren't just stealing. They're reckless, acting like tomorrow's not coming. You keep moving, drawn to a cluster of houses at the square's edge. One has a cross painted on the door, but it's old, faded like the family inside gave up marking their fate. You hear a crash from within, then hushed voices. Looters. You don't stick around to find out. The plague's turned faith into a gamble, and not everyone's betting on salvation. You think back to that family sharing their loaf, clinging to hope, and the grave diggers profiting from death. Faith's absence is a void, and crime's rushing in. You spot a discarded prayer book in the mud, its pages torn, and feel a pang. It's not just a book. It's a symbol of what's breaking. You're getting tired, the jug's weight dragging at your arm. You pass a small shrine, its wooden saint toppled, its base littered with pebbles offerings or apologies you can't tell. The village feels like it's unraveling, and you're caught in the threads. Another joke to cut the gloom. If you think skipping church is rebellious, try looting the offering box because God's on vacation. You'd probably feel a twinge of guilt, but not enough to stop. The plagues made everyone question what's sacred, and when nothing is, stealing's just another choice. You're nearing the village's far side now, where the houses thin out and the fields begin again. You hear a bell toll, faint and irregular from the chapel behind you. It's not calling worshipers, it's marking another death. You glance back, remembering the kneeler with their stolen sack. They're not alone. The plague's shaking faith everywhere. Priests are dead, churches are empty, and the promise of heaven feels like a bad bet. You pass a final house, its door wide open, its contents gutted. A child's shoe lies in the doorway, laces tangled. You don't want to think about what happened here, but you know when faith slips, so does restraint, and looting's just the start. You're almost out of the village, the bells echo fading. The jug feels heavier, a reminder of your own choices. You think of that wrecked butcher shop, the empty market square, the gravedigger's grim hustle. It's all connected: hunger, mistrust, broken trade, and now this faltering faith. The fields ahead are dark, the sky heavier, like it's pressing you down. You're not sure where you're headed. But the village's lesson is clear: when faith crumbles, morals follow, and the reckless take what's left. Something's moving in the shadows ahead, maybe nothing, maybe trouble. You tighten your grip and keep walking. You're trudging through the darkening fields. Now the village's grim chapel and its tolling bell fading into the distance, the jug still a stubborn weight under your arm. The air's colder, sharper, slicing through your threadbare cloak as you follow a winding path toward the grander outskirts of this plague-stricken world. Up ahead, a manor loomstone walls a sagging gate, its once proud towers now hunched against the gray sky. This is noble territory, or was until the Black Death sent the lords and ladies running. You're about to watch how their abandoned estates left unguarded become magnets for looters, turning wealth into a free-for-all. The path crunches underfoot gravel mixing with mud, and you feel a prickle of excitement. Or is it dread as you near the gate? You pause, catching your breath, and scan the manor's grounds. The iron gates ajar, one hinge broken, swinging lazily in the wind. Beyond it, overgrown gardens choke with weeds, and a fountain sits dry, its stone cherubs cracked and mossy. The manor's windows are dark, some shattered, others boarded up half-heartedly. No guards, no servants, no sign of the noble family, who once strutted here, lording over feasts and taxes. The plagues chase them off, maybe to a safer city, maybe to their graves. You step through the gate, heart thumping, and the silence feels wrong, like the house is holding its breath. This place is a looter's dream, and you're about to see why. Let's set the scene. You creep toward the manor's entrance, a massive oak door hanging off its frame, splintered as if someone took an axe to it. The Black Death didn't just kill peasants, it hit the elite too, and those who survived often fled, leaving their estates vulnerable. A mainstream fact to ground us: by 1349, many noble households in England and France lost up to half their members, and survivors abandoned rural manors for urban strongholds or distant kin, hoping to outrun the plague. You see the fallout now. This manor's a ghost, its riches unguarded. You push the door open, wincing at the groan, and step into a grand hall. Dust motes dance in slants of light, and the air smells of mildew and old wine. You're not alone here. You hear a clatter from deeper inside, maybe the kitchens or a storeroom. Looters, no doubt, and they're not being subtle. You tiptoe across the hall, past a toppled chandelier, its crystals scattered like frozen tears. The walls are bare tapestries, gone, probably ripped down for their gold thread. You spot a broken chair, its velvet cushion slashed, stuffing spilling out. Someone's been thorough. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some looters targeted bizarre noble treasures, like peacock feather fans or ivory combs, thinking they'd fetch a fortune, only to find no one's buying in a plague-ravaged world. Imagine risking your neck for a fancy comb and trading it for a moldy loaf medieval eBay fail. Why do abandoned estates draw thieves? Because they're jackpots in a starving world. You think back to that wrecked butcher shop, the empty market square, the grave digger's grim hustle. Those were small scores. This is the big leagues. You wander deeper, past a staircase with a missing banister, and find a dining hall. A long table stretches under cobwebs, its surface scarred plates and goblets gone. Looters have stripped anything portable, but you notice something odd: a single spoon, silver, tucked under a bench, missed in the frenzy. You pocket it, telling yourself it's just practical. The jug's heavy enough. You don't need more guilt, but you get why this place is a magnet. No nobles, no guards, just wealth begging to be taken. You hear another noise closer now, a low curse, then the scrape of wood. You duck behind a moldy curtain, heart racing. Two figures shuffle into the hall, one carrying a sack, the other a rusty knife. They're ragged, their faces smudged with dirt, but their eyes are sharp, scanning for leftovers. "Check the cellar," one mutters. "Heard they hid wine there." You hold your breath as they pass, their boots thumping. They're not nobles, not even merchants, just desperate souls like that boy with the turnip or the chapel kneeler. Historians still argue whether looting estates was rebellion against the elite or pure survival, but here it's both. The nobles fled, leaving their wealth to the wolves, and you're watching the feast. You're starting to feel the manors pull its promise of something, anything, to ease the hunger, the fear. You slip out from the curtain, moving toward the cellar stairs the looters mentioned. The air grows colder, damper as you descend the jug, bumping against your hip. The cellar's a maze of barrels and crates. Most smashed open their contents, grain apples, a few bottles long gone. But you spot a small chest tucked in a corner, its lock broken. You kneel, prying it open, and find a cloth-wrapped bundle. Unwrapping it, you see a silver plate, dented but heavy. Your pulse quickens. You could trade this for food, maybe enough for a week. You hesitate, thinking of that family sharing their loaf. Are you a looter now? You shove the plate back, standing quickly, as footsteps echo above. The looters are circling back. You retreat, finding a side door that leads to the gardens. Outside, the air's fresher, but the manor's weight lingers. You pass a stable, its doors wide, horses gone, stolen, or dead. A little joke to cut the tension. Imagine looting a noble's stable and riding off on a donkey instead of a war horse. Medieval joyride, anyone, but the truth's grim. These estates are beacons for thieves because the noble's flight left a vacuum. No one's patrolling, no one's punishing. The plagues turned hierarchy upside down, and the desperate are cashing in. You're circling the manor now, keeping to the shadows of its outer walls. You spot more signs of looting: a shattered window, a torn cloak caught on a thorn bush, a pile of broken pottery that might have been a noble's prized vase. The estate's a carcass picked clean by vultures who don't care about titles or lineage. You think of the trade roads, wrecked carts, the village's gutted chapel. It's all connected: hunger, mistrust, broken faith, and now this noble collapse. You're tempted to go back for that plate, but the looters' voices are closer, arguing over their haul. You move on the jug and spoon your only spoils, feeling like you've dodged something worse than theft. You're nearing the estate's far gate, the path leading back to open fields. The manor looms behind you, a silent accusation. You see another figure slip through the gate, ahead a shadow with a bulging sack. They don't look back, and you don't call out. Everyone's a thief here, or close to it. Another joke, to keep it light: if you think your neighbors' loud music's annoying, try living next to a manor where looters party all night. You'd probably join them. But seriously, the noble's flight has left these estates defenseless, and the plagues made sure no one's coming back to claim them. The fields stretch out dark and endless, and you wonder what's next in this broken world. You've slipped away from the looted manor, its crumbling grandeur now a shadow at your back as you tread cautiously into the night, the jug still a heavy burden under your arm, and that silver spoon a guilty weight in your pocket. The fields have given way to a tangle of narrow alleys on the village's edge, where the air's thick with damp rot and the faint crackle of distant fires. Moonlight barely cuts through the fog, casting jagged shadows that make every corner feel alive, watching. The Black Deaths turn this place into a predator's lair, and you're sneaking through alleys where organized bandit gangs rule the night, their grip tightening as the plague loosens society's hold. Your boots scrape softly on the uneven stones, and you wince. Silence is your only ally here. You duck into a cramped alley, its walls slick with moss and grime, and press against the cold stone to catch your breath. The hunger's still there, a dull ache, but fear's louder now. You hear a low whistle, sharp and deliberate, echoing from somewhere ahead. It's not a bird, it's a signal. Your pulse spikes. You've heard whispers of gangs, desperate men, sometimes women banding together to exploit the chaos, not just looting, but controlling whole streets. You peek around the corner, And there they are, three figures cloaked, moving with purpose. One carries a club, another a flickering torch that paints their faces in harsh orange. They're not random thieves, they're a crew, and this alley's their kingdom. Let's unpack this. You shrink back, heart thumping, as the gang pauses at a boarded up door. One kicks it, testing its strength, while another mutters something about the baker's stash. These aren't the lone looters you saw at the manor or the gravedigger's grim hustle. They're organized with plans and pecking orders. A mainstream fact to ground us during the Black Death urban areas saw a rise in bandit gangs as social order collapsed, with some groups even extorting survivors for protection, like a medieval mafia. You see it now, their confidence, their coordination. They're not just stealing, they're claiming territory, and you're trespassing. You ease deeper into the alley, keeping low as the gang pries at the door. The wood splinters, and they slip inside, their torchlight vanishing. You wait, ears straining. A crash, then muffled laughter. They found something. You're tempted to bolt, but the alleys are a maze, and running blind's a bad bet. Instead, you move forward, hugging the shadows. Here's a quirky tidbit: some bandit gangs had nicknames like the Night Crows or the Red Knives scrawled on walls to mark their turf. Imagine the ego branding your gang while dodging the plague. You almost smirk, picturing a bandit carving his tag with a stolen dagger. But the thought fades as you hear footsteps behind you. You freeze. Another gang. A straggler. You don't look back, just quicken your pace. Why do gangs thrive in this chaos? Because the night's their playground and the plagues cleared the field. You think back to the manors, empty halls, the village's gutted chapel, the trade roads, wrecked carts. Every crack in the systems, a chance for these gangs to grow. You pass a wall with a crude symbol, slash circle, maybe a gang's mark. It's a warning, and you're not dumb enough to ignore it. Historians still argue whether these gangs were rebels against a broken system or just predators exploiting the weak. But out here, it's clear they're the new law, and you're nobody. The jug feels heavier, a beacon for trouble, and you curse yourself for keeping it. You're deeper in the alleys, now the paths twisting like a snake's spine. You pass a pile of debris, broken crates, a torn cloak, a single shoe crusted with mud. Looters' leftovers, or maybe a gang's trap. You step carefully, avoiding the crunch of glass. Up ahead, a faint glow spills from a corner, and you hear voices, slow, urgent, not the gang from before. You crouch behind a barrel, its wood slimy, and peer out. 4 figures huddle around a small fire, passing a loaf of bread and a bottle. Their armed knives, a hatchet, but they look tired, their faces gaunt. Gang members, but not the top dogs. You catch a snippet, the mill's next, but they're watching it. They're planning, and you're in their world. You're starting to feel the night's grip, its rules sinking in. These gangs aren't just about looting. They're about power. You spot a bloodstain on the ground, dark and fresh, and your stomach lurches. Someone didn't play by the rules. You think of that family sharing their loaf, the boy with the turnip easy prey for these crews. A little joke to cut the tension. If you think your group chat's chaotic, try joining a medieval bandit gang where the dues are a stolen chicken. You'd probably flunk the initiation. But seriously, the gangs thrive because the plagues killed the guards, the nobles, the priests. No one's stopping them, and the night's their empire. You slip past the firelit group, holding your breath, and find another alley, darker, narrower. The walls feel like they're closing in, and the air's sour with rot. You hear a scuffle behind you, then a shout cut off quick. You don't look back. The gangs own these streets, and you're a ghost, slipping through their cracks. You pass a door, its lock smashed, and glimpse a room inside, gutted a table, overturned a child's doll in the corner. The gangs don't care who lived here. They take what's left and move on. You clutch the jug tighter, the spoon digging into your hip. You're not one of them, but you're not clean either. You're getting tired, the alley's endless, each turn a gamble. You spot another gang, mark a crude skull scratched into a wall. It's fresh, the stone still pale where the knife scraped. You're in deep, and the rules are clear: stay quiet, stay hidden, or pay the price. Another joke to keep it light: if you think your commute's rough, try sneaking through bandit alleys with a jug of mystery juice. You'd probably trade it for a map. But the truth's heavier. The gangs rule because the plague's broken everything. Trust, faith, trade, nobility. You think of the manors, looted halls, the chapel's stolen relics. It's all fuel for these night kings. You're nearing the alley's end where the village opens to a wider street. You hear laughter, harsh and close, and duck into a doorway. A gang passes 5 strong, dragging a sack that clinks with metal. They're celebrating, oblivious to you, but you see the blood on one sleeve. You weight the jugs, weight a reminder of your own choices. The street ahead leads to the unknown, maybe safety, maybe more gangs. You think of the butcher's shop at slashed sacks and the grave digger's grim profit. The gangs are just the next step, organized where others scramble. The night's theirs, and you're just passing through, hoping to see dawn. You've slipped out of the bandit-ruled alleys, the gang's harsh laughter fading as you emerge onto a wider street, the jug still a stubborn weight under your arm, and the silver spoon a nagging secret in your pocket. The village is behind you now, its dark rooftops blending into the night, but the air's no less heavy thick with smoke and the faint sour tang of despair. You're heading toward the heart of a nearby town, drawn by the dim glow of torches and the murmur of voices. This isn't the chaotic village or the looted manor. It's a place where justice once held sway, where courts and sheriffs kept order. But the Black Deaths silence that too, and you're about to see how overwhelmed courts are letting robbers roam free, turning law into a whisper. Your boots crunch on gravel, each step echoing in the stillness, and you feel exposed, like the night's judging you. You reach the town's edge, where a wooden sign swings crookedly, its letters faded but legible: Court of the Shire. The building ahead is squat and stone, its windows flickering with weak candlelight. You expected bustle guard scribes, the clink of chains, but it's eerily quiet. A lone man slumps against the wall, his cloak tattered, muttering to himself. You pause, keeping your distance. Has no guard. Maybe a petitioner, maybe a thief who's walked free. The court's doors are ajar, and you hear a raised voice inside, sharp but tired. You slip closer, curiosity outweighing caution, and peer through the gap. The scene's a mess, and it's clear justice is on its knees. Let's unpack this. You ease into the shadows near the door, the jug bumping against your hip. Inside a makeshift courtroom, sprawls benches, overturned papers scattered like leaves, a wooden gavel abandoned on a table. A man in a frayed robe, probably a judge, argues with 2 others, their faces drawn. Piles of documents teeter on the floor, some marked with red wax seals, others torn. The judge's voice cracks. We can't try them all. You catch the gist too. Many crimes, too few hands. A mainstream fact to ground us during the Black Death legal systems across Europe. buckled as judges, clerks, and sheriffs died or fled, with some towns losing 70% of their officials by 1350. You see it now. This court's drowning, and robbers are slipping through the cracks. You linger watching the judge slump into a chair, rubbing his temples. The two men, maybe bailiffs, shuffle papers, but it's futile. You spot a list pinned to the wall, names scrawled in hasty ink: John of Mill Street theft, Agnes Weaver burglary. The list goes on, but half the names are crossed out, cases dropped or forgotten. You think of the gang in the alleys, their blood-stained sleeves, and the looters at the manor. They're not here facing justice. They're out there free. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some medieval courts resorted to ordeals like dunking suspects in water to test guilt when judges were too overwhelmed. Imagine getting acquitted because you sank gracefully. Medieval logic at its finest. You almost chuckle, but the judge's weary sigh pulls you back. Why does a failing court let robbers thrive? Because justice needs muscle, and the plagues cut it away. You step back, the night air cold against your face, and notice the streets not empty anymore. A figure darts past, clutching a sack, their hood low. Another thief, probably fresh from a raid, and no one's chasing them. You think of the butcher shop, its slashed sacks, and the chapel's stolen relics. The courts can't keep up too. Many crimes, too few judges, and the plagues made every trial a gamble. Historians still argue whether this legal collapse fueled long-term crime waves or just exposed society's fragility. But here, it's obvious: when justice goes, quiet chaos speaks. You're tempted to slip inside, maybe eavesdrop more, but a shout from the street stops you. A woman, her voice shrill, accuses someone of stealing her grain. A man snaps back, denying it, and a small crowd gathers, 5, maybe 6 people, all gaunt, all angry. No guards come. The court's right there, but it's useless, a hollow shell. You back away, keeping to the shadows, and head down a side street. The buildings here are taller, their shutters bolted, but you see signs of trouble, broken locks, smeared blood on a doorstep. The robbers aren't just roaming. They're bold, knowing no gavel's coming down. You're starting to feel the town's pulse, or lack of it. The court's silence is louder than any verdict. You pass a gibbet in a small square, its noose empty, swaying in the breeze. Once it held a thief, a warning to others. Now it's a joke, and the robbers know it. A little jab to lighten the mood. If you think your parking ticket's unfair, try facing a medieval court that's too busy to care you stole a cow. You'd probably keep the cow. But seriously, the plagues gutted the system. You spot a poster nailed to a post, faded but readable: reward for capture of Thomas the Cutler thief. No one's claimed it. Thomas is probably laughing somewhere, his pockets full. You keep moving, the jug's weight dragging at your arm. The street opens into a marketplace, smaller than the one you saw days ago, but just as dead. Stalls are smashed, their awnings torn, a lone apple rotting in the dirt. You hear a scuffle nearby and duck behind a cart. 2 men grapple, one accusing the other of stealing his cloak. They're not bandits, just neighbors, but the plagues made everyone a suspect. No one calls for the sheriff. There isn't one. You think of the boy with his turnip, the family shared loaf. They're not safe, not when justice is this weak. The men part cursing, and you slip away, heart pounding. You're deeper in the town now, the court a memory, but its failure everywhere. You pass a house with a broken door, its contents spilling out: cloth, a pot, a child's toy. Someone's been here, and no one's coming to punish them. Another joke to cut the gloom. Imagine a medieval cop trying to arrest a looter, but getting stuck in quarantine bad day at the office. But the truth's heavier. The courts are overwhelmed because the plagues killed the people who ran them, and the survivors are too scared or sick to care. You clutch the jug, the spoon digging into your hip. You're not a thief, but you're not innocent either. And in this town, no one's checking. You're nearing the town's far side, where the streets widen and the torches thin out. You hear a distant bell, not the chapel's, but a watchman's, feeble and late. It's no comfort. The court's silence has let the gangs grow, the looters thrive, the desperate turn bold. You spot a figure ahead, leaning against a wall watching you. They don't move, but their eyes glint. You tighten your grip on the jug and hurry past, feeling their stare. The town's a trap, and justice's absence is the bait. You think of the manor's looted halls, the gangs, alley marks, the chapel's stolen relics. It's all connected hunger, fear-broken faith, and now this silent law. The road ahead stretches into the dark, and you're not sure what's waiting, but you keep moving, hoping for something better than this. You're trudging away from the town's silent court, its flickering torches now faint specks in the distance, the jug still a heavy anchor under your arm, and the silver spoon a quiet shame in your pocket. The road's rougher, here winding through patchy fields toward a cluster of low-roofed houses, a rural village, smaller than the one you passed before its silhouette, barely cutting through the pre-dawn mist. The air's damp, heavy, with the scent of wet hay, and something sharper, like fear baked into the earth. The Black Death's not just a city killer. It's tearing through these quiet hamlets, and you're about to feel how rural communities are fracturing under its strain, turning neighbor against neighbor in a slow, bitter collapse. Your boots sink into the mud. Each step, a reminder of the hunger gnawing at you, and the village ahead feels less like refuge, more like a wound. You reach the village's edge, where a sagging fence marks the boundary. A wooden cross, crudely carved, leans in the dirt, surrounded by wilted herbs, someone's attempt at a plague ward, useless now. The houses are huddled close, their thatch roofs patchy, some with red crosses daubed on doors, others dark and silent. You expected warmth, maybe the glow of a hearth, but it's cold, the kind of quiet that screams trouble. A dog barks sharp and cut off, and you freeze, scanning the shadows. A woman's silhouette moves behind a shutter, her eyes catching the faint moonlight, watching, not welcoming. You feel it already, this place is breaking, and trust is the first casualty. Let's dive in. You step forward, keeping to the path between houses, your breath visible in the chilly air. Rural villages like this were tight-knit, built on shared harvests and mutual help, but the plagues changed the rules. You pass a barn, its door half-open, hay spilling out like it was ransacked. A mainstream fact to ground us, the Black Death hit rural areas, hard, killing up to 50% of some village populations by 1350, disrupting planting and harvesting cycles, and leaving survivors to fight over scraps. You see it now, a garden stripped bare not by pests, but by hands, probably neighbors, who once shared ale at harvest feasts. The plagues turned them into strangers, and you're walking through the fallout. You pause by a well, its bucket dangling the water below, dark and still. You're thirsty, but you hesitate. Wells were blamed for spreading the plague, and you're not that desperate yet. A faint argument drifts from a nearby house, voices low, but heated. You took my grain. I swear. It's not bandits or gangs like in the alleys. It's villagers' people who've known each other forever now, at each other's throats. You move on, catching a glimpse through a cracked door. A man, gaunt, guarding a sack of barley like it's gold. His wife whispering nervously, "They're not sharing not anymore." Here's a quirky tidbit. Some villagers buried their food in secret caches only to forget where in their fevered panic. Imagine digging up your yard for a lost potato medieval treasure hunt gone wrong. Why do villages turn on themselves? Because the plague's a sledgehammer, smashing the bonds that held them together. You think back to the town's useless court, the manor's looted halls, the gang-ruled alleys. Cities had their chaos, but villages were supposed to be different, closer, stronger. Not now. You pass a small common, where a fire pit's gone cold, its ashes scattered. This was where they'd gather, singing, settling disputes. Now it's empty, and you spot a broken pitchfork, its tines bent, lying in the dirt. Was it a fight? You don't want to know. But you feel the fracture, the way trust has soured into suspicion. You're deeper in the village now. The houses closer, their silence heavier. You hear a sob, soft from a house with no cross. You peer through a gap in the shutter and see a girl maybe 12 cradling a younger child, their faces pale. A loaf of bread half-eaten sits between them, but they're not eating. They're hiding it like they expect someone to burst in. You back away heart-heavy. These aren't thieves like the manor looters or the grave diggers. Their kids scared their neighbors will steal their last bite. Historians still argue whether rural breakdowns were driven more by fear or scarcity, but here it's both. The plague stripped away the village's heart, and you're walking through its pieces. You're starting to feel the strain yourself, not just the hunger or the weight of the jug, but the loneliness of this place. You pass a shed, its door, smashed tools, gone stolen, probably by someone who used to borrow them freely. A little joke to cut the gloom. If you think your neighbor's annoying for borrowing your lawnmower, try catching them stealing your last shovel because the plague's coming. You'd probably bolt your door too. But seriously, the village is fracturing because survival's a solo game now. You spot a crude mark on a wall/slash line, maybe a warning to stay away. It's not a gang's tag. It's personal neighbor against neighbor. You keep moving, drawn to a cluster of houses at the village's far end. The path narrows the mud thicker, and you hear a shout, then a crash. You duck behind a rain barrel, peering out. Two men grapple in a doorway, one accusing the other of stealing chickens. A woman tries to pull them apart, but they're past reason. No one else comes, no elders, no mediators. The village has lost its voice. You think of that family sharing their loaf, the boy with his turnip, the chapel's stolen relics. It's all connected hunger, fear-broken, faith-silent courts, and now this self-destruction. The men part one bleeding the other, clutching a sack. You slip away, heart pounding. You're getting tired, the jug dragging at your arm, the spoon a reminder of your own shaky choices. You pass a final house, its door barred, a faint light leaking through cracks. Someone's awake guarding what's left. You hear a child's voice, soft asking for food, and a mother's hushed reply, "Tomorrow." There won't be enough tomorrow, and they know it. Another joke to keep it light. Imagine fighting over the last cabbage like it's a crown jewel medieval drama at its finest. But the truth's heavier. The plagues turned this village into a battlefield not against outsiders, but within, and no one's winning. You're nearing the village's edge now, where the fields stretch out again, dark and endless. A lone figure stands by a fence watching you, their face hidden in shadow. They don't speak, but their stance says, "Enough, keep moving." You do the jugs, wait a constant pull, the spoon, a quiet accusation. The village's fracture is a mirror, of everything you've seen. The manors, looted wealth. The gang's night, rule the court's silence. The plagues, breaking more than bodies. It's breaking bonds. And you're feeling it in your bones. The road ahead is dark. The air colder, and you're not sure where it leads, but you keep walking, hoping for something whole in this shattered world. You've left the fractured village behind its silent feuds and broken bonds, fading into the dawns. Gray haze, the jug still a heavy burden under your arm, and the silver spoon a nagging weight in your pocket. The road stretches ahead, rutted and slick with morning dew, leading toward a larger town where trade once thrived. The air's crisp, tinged with the faint smoke of distant hearths, but there's a tension here, like the world's bracing for trouble. The Black Death's not just breeding thieves, it's forcing survivors to adapt, and you're about to meet merchants who are fighting back against rampant theft, arming up to protect what's left of their livelihoods. Your boots squelch in the mud, the hunger from before a dull throb, and the town's faint rooftops promise either safety or a new kind of danger. You reach the town's outskirts, where a wooden bridge spans a sluggish stream, its planks creaking underfoot. A cart's parked at the far end, guarded by two men, their faces hard hands resting on the hilts of short swords. They eye you warily, and you slow your pace, raising a hand to show you're no threat. The cart's loaded with sax grain, maybe cloth covered with a tarp, but you notice the ropes are knotted tight, like they expect someone to try cutting them. These aren't peddlers selling trinkets. They're merchants, and they're ready for a fight. You nod, keeping your distance, and they let you pass, but their stares follow you into the town. Let's set the scene. You're walking down a cobbled street narrower than the one by the court, but busier, with a few wary souls hurrying past. The market square's a head smaller than you'd hoped, its stalls patched together from scavenged wood. Merchants huddle behind their wares. Barrels of ale, stacks of wool, a few wilted vegetable. Each with a weapon close at hand, a cudgel, a knife. One even grips a crossbow, its string taut. The Black Death's made trade a battlefield, a mainstream fact to ground us. By 1349, surviving merchants faced constant raids as bandit gangs and desperate looters targeted their goods, forcing many to hire guards or arm themselves, doubling their costs in a collapsing economy. You see it now. These traders aren't just selling, they're defending. You pause by a stall where a wiry man with a scarred cheek sells apples, his eyes scanning the crowd. A mace rests on his counter, its iron head gleaming. You catch his glance, and he sizes you up, lingering on the jug. "No trouble," he says, voice low, like he said it 100 times. You nod, stepping back, but you notice his hand never leaves the mace. He's not alone. Across the square, a woman selling cloth has a dagger tucked into her belt, and a boy, maybe her son, holds a sling pebbles bulging in his pouch. They're not trusting anyone, not after the plagues turned markets into hunting grounds. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some merchants spread rumors of cursed goods to scare off thieves, claiming their grain was tainted by plague spirits. Imagine a looter running from a sack of barley, thinking it's haunted medieval mind games. Why are merchants arming up? Because theft's not a risk, it's a guarantee. You think back to the gang-ruled alleys, the looted manor, the village's bitter feuds. Those were chaos. This is survival with a plan. You wander the square, keeping your head low, and notice the merchants' makeshift defenses, barricades of crates, ropes strung between stalls to trip intruders. Even a dog tied to a post, its growl low and constant. The plagues stripped away the guards, the courts, the nobles protection, leaving these traders to fend for themselves. Historians still argue whether armed merchants stabilized trade or just escalated the violence. But here, it's clear they're fighting to keep what's theirs, and they're not backing down. You're starting to feel the square's rhythm, its tense balance of commerce and caution. You pass a stall selling ale, its owner a burly man with a patched cloak pouring from a barrel while gripping a staff. A customer haggles, but the merchant cuts him off. Pay now or walk. The man grumbles, tossing coins, and you catch the glint of a knife under the customer's cloak. No one's here for a friendly chat. You think of that family, sharing their loaf. The boy with his turnip, they'd be easy prey in this market. A little joke to cut the tension. If you think your grocery store's crowded, try bartering for apples while dodging a merchant's mace. You'd probably stick to foraging. But seriously, these traders are armed because the plagues made every sale a gamble. You keep moving, drawn to a larger stall at the square's edge, where a group of merchants confers, their voices hushed. One older, with a gray beard, leans on a spear, gesturing at a map scratched in the dirt, likely routes to avoid bandits. You linger nearby, pretending to eye a stack of wool and catch their talk, the road to York's crawling with them. Lost 2 carts last week. They're not just fighting thieves in the market. They're battling to keep trade alive. You notice their guards. 3 men armed with clubs and rusty helmets watching the crowd like hawks. The merchants have become their own militia, and you're impressed, but also uneasy. What happens when they start fighting each other? You're getting tired. The jug's weight pulling at your arm, the spoon a reminder of your own blurry morals. You pass a final stall where a woman sells herbs, her hands steady but her eyes darting. A small axe rests by her side, its blade nicked but sharp. She catches you looking and snaps by or move on. You mumble an apology and step away, feeling the square's tension coil tighter. Another joke to keep it light. Imagine trying to haggle with a merchant who's got a crossbow aimed at your chest, talk about a hard sell. But the truth's heavier. The plagues forced these traders to become warriors, and every weapon's a sign of how far trust has fallen. You're nearing the market's far side now, where the stalls thin out and the street opens to a road beyond. You hear a shout behind you. A merchant's voice accusing someone of stealing. A scuffle breaks out, and you glance back to see the apple seller swinging his mace, a thief scrambling away with a bloody nose. The crowd watches, but no one helps. No guards come. The merchants are the law here, and they're not gentle. You think of the court's scattered papers, the village's broken pitchfork, the manor's gutted halls. It's all connected: hunger, fierce silent justice, and now this armed defiance. The road ahead is dark, the air colder, but you keep walking. The merchants resolve a faint spark in this broken world. You're slipping away from the armed merchants' market. Their watchful eyes and glinting weapons fading into the towns. Smoky haze, the jug still a heavy burden under your arm, and the silver spoon a nagging secret in your pocket. The road's quieter now, winding past crumbling walls and abandoned carts, the air sharp with the bite of early frost and the faint rot of untended fields. You're heading toward a cluster of makeshift shelters on the town's fringe, where survivors huddle, driven by desperation and whispers. The Black Death's not just a disease. It's a story spun into myths that twist truth and fuel chaos. You're about to hear wild rumors that justify looting as survival, turning fear into an excuse for crime. Your boots crunch on frosted grass, the hunger a familiar ache, and the shelters ahead hum with low, urgent voices. You reach the encampment, a ragged sprawl of tents and lean-tos patched from old cloth and broken planks. A fire crackles in the center, its smoke curling into the gray sky, and a dozen figures gather around it. Men, women, a few kids, their faces gaunt eyes darting. They're not merchants or bandits, just survivors clinging to scraps of hope. You pause at the edge, unnoticed, and catch their talk, a mix of fear and defiance. A woman with a tattered shawl speaks, her voice low but fierce. They say the plague's a curse sent to punish hoarders. Taking their grains, no sign it's justice. You feel a chill, not from the cold, but from the conviction in her words. These myths are spreading, and they're dangerous. Let's unpack this. You ease closer, keeping to the shadows of a sagging tent, the jug tucked tight against your side. The firelight flickers, casting long shadows, and you listen as the stories unfold. Another man, his beard matted, nods. Heard the rich hide cures in their cellars, steal their gold, you find the tonic. The crowd murmurs, some nodding, others clutching knives or sticks. These aren't just rumors. They're justifications turning looting into a righteous act, a mainstream fact to ground us during the Black Death misinformation, thrived with myths, blaming everyone from Jews to witches, for the plague often sparking violence and theft as people sought scapegoats or cures. You see it now. These survivors aren't just stealing to eat. They believe it's their right, even their duty. You shift your weight, the frost crunching underfoot, and catch a new story. A boy barely a teen speaks up, eyes wide. My uncle said the dead's treasures break the plagues. Spell take their rings. You're safe. The crowd leans in, some scoffing, others nodding. You almost smirk. Imagine looting a corpse for a shiny bauble, thinking it's a magic shield. Here's a quirky tidbit: some believed stealing from plague victims' homes could transfer their luck to the thief, a bizarre superstition that sent looters rummaging through quarantined houses. Picture a thief snagging a velvet cloak, convinced it's a plague-proof talisman, only to catch the disease himself. Medieval irony at its finest. But these myths aren't funny here. They're fuel, and the fire's spreading. Why do plague myths breed crime? Because they give desperation a purpose. You think back to the merchants' armed stalls, the village's bitter feuds, the gang-ruled alleys. Those were raw survival. This is survival with a story. You move closer to the fire, staying low, and notice a woman carving a symbol into a sticka crude eye. Maybe a charm against the plague. She mutters about cursed nobles hiding food, and you see the spark in her eyes. These rumors aren't just talk. They're a call to action, telling people it's okay holy event to break into a manor or raid a cart. Historians still argue whether these myths were born from fear or deliberate manipulation. But out here, they're a license to steal, and the camp's buzzing with it. You're starting to feel the camp's fever, its mix of hope and rage. You spot a man at the fire's edge, sharpening a knife, his hands steady, but his eyes wild. He's listening, nodding, and you wonder if he's planning his next move: a merchant's cart, a neighbor's barn. You think of that family sharing their loaf, the boy with his turnip. They're not safe from these believers. A little joke to cut the tension. If you think your co-workers' conspiracy theories are wild, try dodging a looter who thinks stealing your shoes will cure the plague. You'd probably hide your boots. But seriously, these myths are rewriting morality, making theft a sacred mission in a world where God's gone silent. You're tempted to join the fire, maybe hear more, but a shout breaks the rhythm. A man stumbles into the camp, breathless, clutching a sack that clinks. Got it from the miller's shed, he gasps. The crowd surges, some cheering, others demanding a share. You see the sacks, content candlesticks, a few coins, no food. He's not starving. He's chasing the myth, believing the miller's wealth holds a cure. The woman with the shawl grabs a candlestick, proclaiming it blessed. You back away, heart pounding. This isn't survival. It's delirium, and it's spreading faster than the plague. You're deeper in the camp, now weaving between tents, the voices a constant hum. You pass a lean-to where a family huddles, their eyes hollow, whispering about poisoned wells and witches' hordes. They're not looting yet, but they're listening, and you know it's only a matter of time. Another joke to keep it light. Imagine believing a stolen goblet will save you only to trade it for a cure that's just boiled weeds. Medieval scam central. But the truth's darker. These myths are a lifeline for the desperate, and they're turning camps like this into breeding grounds for crime. You're getting tired, the jug dragging at your arm, the spoon a reminder of your own shaky choices. You pass a final tent where an old man sits alone, muttering about God's wrath and sinners' gold. He sees you, his eyes narrowing, and you hurry past, feeling his stare. The camp's a powder keg, and the myths are the spark. You think of the merchants' maces, the village's broken pitchfork, the manor's gutted halls. It's all connected: hunger, fear, silent justice. And now these twisted tales. The road ahead opens to fields dark and frost-covered, and you hear a chant behind you, low and fervent, like a prayer for thieves. You keep walking, the myth's weight heavier than the jug, hoping to outrun their pull. You're trudging away from the myth-fueled encampment, its fervent chants and flickering fires fading into the frosty dawn. The jug still a heavy burden under your arm, and the silver spoon a nagging guilt in your pocket. The roads, a muddy ribbon, now snaking through barren fields toward a sprawl of ramshackle huts on the town's outskirts. The air's sharp, laced with the stench of damp earth and distant decay, and a thin fog clings to the ground, making every shadow feel alive. The Black Deaths orphaned countless children, and you're about to follow a group of these kids driven by hunger and loss as they turn to robbery, to eat, weaving their small, desperate threads into the plague's chaotic tapestry. Your boots squelch in the mire, the hunger a familiar ache, and the huts ahead hum with the restless energy of the forsaken. You reach the edge of the settlement, a chaotic jumble of lean-tos and salvaged wood, more a squatter's camp than a village. A crude sign, half buried in mud, marks a path to the orphan's den, scrawled in a child's shaky hand. You pause, catching a glimpse of movement. 3 small figures darting between huts, their cloaks too big, dragging in the dirt. They're kids, no older than 12, moving with the wary grace of alley cats. One clutches a sack, lumpy with odd shapes, and you hear a faint clink. Stolen goods, no doubt. You follow, keeping your distance, heart heavy but curious. These aren't the bandits from the alleys or the myth-charged looters. They're children, and the plagues made them thieves. Let's dive in. You trail the kids, staying low, using the fog, and the huts' shadows for cover. They move fast, ducking under a sagging fence and slipping into a narrow lane cluttered with debris, broken pots, a torn blanket, a single tiny shoe that twists your gut. The Black Deaths left these kids without parents' homes or hope, and hunger's a cruel teacher. A mainstream fact to ground us: by 1350, the plague had orphaned thousands across Europe, with some estimates suggesting 20% of urban children lost both parents, forcing them into scavenging, theft, or worse, to survive. You see it now. Their quick glances, their whispered signals. They're not playing. They're hunting, and you're watching their world unravel. You're closer now, close enough to hear their hushed voices. The leader, a girl with tangled hair and a scar across her cheek, hisses, "The tanners shed as sick won't notice." The others nod, eyes wide, but hard, like they've seen too much to flinch. You follow as they creep toward a low building, its door unmarked, but ajar, the faint smell of leather and rot seeping out. The girl pries the door wider, and they slip inside, quick as ghosts. You wait, heart pounding, and hear a soft crash, something falling, maybe a crate. They're looting, and you can't look away. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some orphan kids form gangs with names like the Sparrow Pack, marking their halls with chalk symbols to claim bragging rights. Imagine a 10-year-old swaggering over a stolen apple medieval street cred. Why do kids turn to robbery? Because the plague's stolen everything else, family safety, childhood. You think back to the myth-charged camp, the merchant's armed stalls, the village's bitter feuds. Those were adults' chaos. This is smaller, sharper, a knife in the heart. You edge closer to the shed, peering through a cracked wall. The kids are rifling through sacks, pulling out strips of leather, a loaf of stale bread, a dented tin cup. The girl stuffs the bread into her sack, her hands trembling, not from fear, but hunger. You know that feeling, the gnawing ache from days ago, and you see it in their pinched faces. Historians still argue whether child thieves were victims or opportunists, but here it's clear they're surviving, and stealing's their only path. You're starting to feel the weight of their world, not just the jug or the spoon's quiet guilt, but the raw unfairness of it. You back away from the shed, giving them space, and notice other signs of their work: a broken lock on a nearby hut, a pile of apple cores hidden under straw. These kids are everywhere, invisible, until they strike. You hear a laugh, soft and startling, from the shed, the younger boy, clutching the tin cup like it's treasure. For a moment, they're just kids, but the moment fades as the axe. You're getting tired, the jug dragging at your arm, the spoon, a reminder of your own shaky choices. You pass a final house, its door barred, a faint light leaking through cracks. Someone's awake, guarding what's left. You hear a child's voice, soft, asking for food, and a mother's hushed reply, "Tomorrow." There won't be enough tomorrow, and they know it. Another joke to keep it light: imagine fighting over the last cabbage like it's a crown jewel medieval drama at its finest. But the truth's heavier. The plagues turn this village into a battlefield, not against outsiders, but within, and no one's winning. You're nearing the village's edge now, where the fields stretch out again, dark and endless. A lone figure stands by a fence, watching you, their face hidden in shadow. They don't speak, but their stance says enough: keep moving. You do the jug's weight, a constant pull the spoon, a quiet accusation. The village's fracture is a mirror of everything you've seen. The manor's looted wealth, the gang's night rule, the court's silence, the plague's breaking more than bodies. It's breaking bonds, and you're feeling it in your bones. The road ahead is dark, the air colder, and you're not sure where it leads, but you keep walking, hoping for something whole in this shattered world. You've left the orphans' desperate hustle behind their fleeting shadows, and stolen scraps fading into the foggy dawn, the jug still a heavy weight under your arm, and the silver spoon a persistent guilt in your pocket. The road's a muddy slog, now twisting through barren fields toward a cluster of sturdy houses on the edge of a larger town. Their stone walls and tiled roofs, a stark contrast to the ramshackle huts you've seen. The air's thick with the scent of wood smoke and damp straw, but there's a tension here, a quiet that feels like a held breath. The Black Death's push survivors to extremes, and you're about to observe how stockpiling, hoarding food goods, anything to outlast the plague, is fueling desperate break-ins, turning neighbors into targets. Your boots sink into the mire, the hunger a familiar gnaw, and the houses ahead promise either refuge or a new kind of conflict. You reach the town's fringe, where a low wall marks the boundary, its stones chipped but solid. The houses are tightly packed, their shutters bolted, some reinforced, with iron barsa, sign of wealth, or at least determination. You spot a cart tucked behind one house piled high with sacks and covered with a tarp ropes, knotted like a fortress. Someone's hoarding, and they're not subtle. You pause, keeping to the shadows of a gnarled tree, and notice movement, a figure cloaked circling the cart, testing the ropes with a knife. Your pulse quickens. This isn't a kid or a gang. It's a lone thief driven by the same desperation you've seen everywhere, and that cart's a beacon. You stay still, watching the dance of greed and fear unfold. Let's unpack this. You ease closer, the jug bumping against your side, and crouch behind a stack of firewood. The thief's methodical, slicing a rope with a practiced hand, but they're nervous, glancing over their shoulder every few seconds. The house's door is barred, its windows dark, but you sense eyes watching. Someone's awake, guarding their stash. The Black Deaths turned survival into a game of haves and have-nots, and hoarding's the winning move for those who can afford it. A mainstream fact to ground us: by 1349, wealthy survivors in towns across Europe stockpiled food and goods, sometimes buying entire harvests to secure their families, driving prices up and leaving the poor to starve or steal. You see it now. The cart stuffed with grain, maybe oil a fortune in this broken world, and it's pulling thieves like moths to a flame. You're close enough to hear the thief's ragged breathing as they pry open a sack, spilling barley into the mud. They curse, scooping it up, but freeze as a shutter creaks above. A woman's voice, sharp and low, hisses, "Get gone or he'll gut you." The thief bolts, leaving the sack half open, barley glinting in the dawn. You hold your breath, expecting a chase, but the shutter slams shut. The hoarders not risking a fight, not yet. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some hoarders spread tales of plague traps in their stashes, spiked barrels, or poisoned grain to scare off thieves. Imagine a looter dodging imaginary spikes, only to find the treasure is a sack of moldy oats. Medieval prank gone wrong. You almost smirk, but the tension's too thick, and you're too close to the action. Why does hoarding fuel break-ins? Because it's a neon sign screaming, "I've got what you need." You think back to the orphan's stolen bread, the myth-fueled camp's wild chants, the merchant's armed stalls. Those were scraps and dreams. This is wealth, tangible and maddening. You slip away from the firewood, moving toward another house, this one with a red cross on the door, but a suspiciously heavy lock. You hear a scuffle nearby and duck behind a barrel. Two figures, hooded, are prying at a cellar hatch, whispering about the brewer's stock. They're not after beer. They want his rumored hoard barrels of flour, maybe salted fish. The hatch groans, and they slip inside, leaving you to wonder if they'll make it out. Historians still argue whether hoarding was prudent or selfish, but here it's a magnet for desperation, and break-ins are the cost. You're starting to feel the town's pulse, its quiet paranoia. You move deeper, passing houses with barred gates and chained carts, each a fortress against the desperate. You spot a broken window, its frame splintered glass, glittering in the Muda failed break-in, or a successful one. The hoarders inside probably counting their sacks while the thieves long gone or bleeding out. You think of that family sharing their loaf the boy with his turnip. They'd kill for a glimpse of these stashes, but they'd never get close. A little joke to cut the gloom. If you think your pantry's overstocked, try guarding a cart of grain with a pitchfork while looters circle. You'd probably sleep with one eye open. But seriously, hoarding's a survival tactic that breeds resentment, and resentment breeds theft. You're drawn to a larger house, its walls sturdy, its door reinforced with iron. A faint light leaks through a shutter, and you hear voice, slow, urgent planning. You creep closer, peering through a crack. A man grizzled and broad stacks barrels in a corner, while a woman counts coins, their faces tight with worry. Their hoards, impressive sacks of grain, jars of oil, even a crate of dried apples, but it's a prison too. They're not sleeping, not trusting, and you get why every sack's a reason for someone to break in. You back away, heart heavy as a shadow moves across the street, another thief, or maybe a neighbor, eyeing the house like a predator. The line between hoarder and target is razor thin. You're getting tired, the jug dragging at your arm, the spoon a reminder of your own shaky morals. You pass a final house, its gate smashed, its cart, overturned sacks, slashed open and empty. Someone got here first, and you can almost hear the hoarder's screams. Another joke to keep it light. Imagine hoarding a year's worth of food, only for a thief to swipe it while you're praying for plague protection. Bad timing much. But the truth's heavier. Hoarding's a fortress that invites siege, and the plagues made everyone a soldier or a thief. You clutch the jug, feeling its weight, and wonder if you'd hoard too, if you had the chance. You're nearing the town's far edge now, where the houses thin out and the fields stretch dark and silent. You hear a crash behind you, a door, splintering a man's shout, then silence. Another break-in, another hoard breached. You don't look back. You've seen enough. The hoardings, a spark, and the break-ins are the fire burning through what's left of trust. You think of the orphans' stolen cup, the merchant's maces, the village's broken pitchfork. It's all connected: hunger, fear, silent justice, wild myths, and now this desperate divide between hoarding and theft. The road ahead is dark, the air colder, and you keep walking, the jug and spoon, your only companions, hoping to find something beyond this cycle of hoarding and theft. You've slipped away from the town's hoarded fortresses and desperate break-ins, their splintered doors and whispered threats fading into the cold morning mist, the jug still a heavy burden under your arm, and the silver spoon a lingering guilt in your pocket. The road's softer, now a winding path of packed earth, leading through sparse fields toward a distant hamlet, its low rooftops barely visible against the pale dawn. The air's crisp, carrying the faint scent of fresh-cut wood and baking bread. Stark contrast to the rot and smoke you've breathed for days. The Black Death's left scars everywhere, but you're about to find glimmers of resilience, small sparks of hope as communities rebuild trust in the ruins. Your boots crunch on frost-dusted grass, the hunger a quiet ache, and the hamlet ahead feels like a fragile promise, one you're not sure you can trust. You reach the hamlet's edge, where a simple wooden gate stands, not barred, but guarded by a woman with a staff, her face weathered, but calm. She nods as you approach, no suspicion in her eyes, just a quiet assessment. Passing through, she asks, voice steady. You nod, surprised by her openness, and she waves you in. The hamlet's small, a dozen houses around a common green, but its alive smoke curls from chimneys, a child laughs somewhere, and a man hammers nails into a new fence. After the looted manors, gang-ruled alleys, and fractured villages, this feels like a dream. But it's real, and you're about to see how hope flickers amid the ruin. Let's unpack this. You wander into the common, the jug bumping against your side, and take in the scene. A group of villagers, 10, maybe 12, work together, some hauling timber, others kneading dough on a shared table. They're not hoarding or fighting. They're building, sharing, trusting. The Black Death's shadow lingers. Two houses bear red crosses, their doors sealed, but the survivors aren't hiding. A mainstream fact to ground us by 1350. Some communities, especially smaller hamlets, began rebuilding after the plague's worst waves, pooling resources and labor to restore fields and homes, often led by local leaders or clergy who survived. You see it now: a priest, his robes patched, directs the fence building, his voice gentle but firm. This hamlet's fighting back, and trust is their weapon. You pause by the table where a woman with flour-dusted hands offers you a chunk of warm bread. Eat, she says, no questions, no price. You hesitate, the spoon's weight sharp in your pocket, but take it, the bread's warmth, a shock after days of hunger. It's not much, but it's a gift, and you feel a pang, not just gratitude, but awe. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some post-plague villages held feasts of survival, sharing meager harvests to mark their defiance of death, even inviting strangers to join. Imagine breaking bread with a neighbor you once feared toasting, to outliving the plague medieval optimism at its rawest. You chew slowly, watching the villagers, and notice their ease, their quiet chatter. They're not naive. They're choosing to trust, and it's working. Why does hope flicker here? Because ruin forces choices, and some choose to rebuild. You think back to the hoarded carts, the orphans' stolen scraps, the myth-fueled camp's wild chants. Those were survival's dark side. This is its light. You wander toward the fence where the priest hands nails to a boy no older than the orphans you followed, but his hands are steady, his face focused. They're not just fixing a fence, they're fixing a community. Historians still argue whether these resilient hamlets were exceptions or the seeds of recovery. But here, it's clear trust is a risk, and they're taking it, building something stronger than fear. You're starting to feel the hamlet's rhythm, its quiet defiance. You pass a small garden, freshly tilled sprouts, poking through the soil, a gamble on tomorrow. A woman tends it, her hands slow but sure, and she smiles as you pass, no trace of the suspicion you saw in the village's watching eyes. You think of that family sharing their loaf, the boy with his turnip. They'd find a place here, maybe. A little joke to cut the tension. If you think your community garden's a hassle, try planting one while the plague's knocking talk about high stakes. But seriously, this hamlet's resilience is a lifeline, and you're seeing it in every shared tool, every open door. You're drawn to a barn at the common's edge where villagers stack hay and repair a cart. A man, broad-shouldered, notices you and calls you over. "Help if you're able," he says, tossing you a rope. You hesitate, the jug awkward in your grip, but join in tying the rope to secure a load. The work's simple, but it feels like a pact. You're not a stranger anymore. You think of the merchant's maces, the gang's alley, marks the court's scattered papers. Those were walls. This is a bridge. Another joke to keep it light. Imagine joining a medieval work crew and getting paid in bread instead of gold best gig in town. But the truth's heavier. This hamlet's rebuilding trust because they've seen the alternative and they're done with it. You're getting tired, the jug dragging at your arm, the spoon a reminder of your own choices. You step back, watching the villagers finish the cart. The priest claps the boy's shoulder, and the woman from the table brings water shared in a single cup. It's small, but it's everything trust, hope, resilience. You think of the manor's gutted halls, the village's broken pitchfork, the orphan's stolen cup. It's all connected, hunger, fear-broken systems, but here it's healing. You spot a child drawing in the dirt, a crude sun with a smile, and feel a flicker of warmth. The plague's not gone, but this hamlet's fighting it not with weapons, but with community. You're nearing the hamlet's far side now, where the path leads back to the fields, cold and endless. The woman at the gate nods as you approach her staff, still, but her eyes kind. "Stay, if you want," she says, and you pause, the jug heavy, the spoon heavier. You shake your head, not ready to let go of the road, but her offer lingers. You think of the myths, the hoarding, the silent courts, and realize this hamlet's the answer: fragile, flickering hope. The fields stretch out the air softer now, and you keep walking the jug and spoon, your only burdens carrying their warmth into the dark. You're on the road again, the hamlet's glow fading behind you, its laughter and shared bread, a quiet hum in your memory. The fields are still the sky, softening to a pale gray, and the world feels gentler, like it's catching its breath. You imagine the villagers now finishing their fence, tending their garden, their voices blending into a soft murmur, a lullaby against the plague's shadow. The jug still heavy, but it's just weight, not a chain. The spoons, just metal, not a verdict. You're tired. Your steps slow the frost melting under your boots, leaving only earth steady and forgiving. Picture the hamlet's fire its embers, glowing warming hands that chose trust over fear. Let that warmth settle in you, a soft blanket easing the ache of the journey. The road stretches on, but it's okay to rest now, to let the world's sharp edges blur. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and let the hamlet's hope carry you into sleep, a whisper of tomorrow in a world still finding its way.